Okay, so I'm really pleased to introduce Heather Binning. She's the founder of Women's Rights Network, which is a rapidly growing grassroots network of women from England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and whose primary focus is to defend the sex-based rights of women. She's talking about the report, when we are at our most vulnerable, the sickening extent of rapes and sexual assaults in hospitals. Thank you so much, Heather, for coming on, and over to you.
In England, but Women's Rights Network that I founded is UK based, so it's all 4 nations. We have about 2,000 women across the UK in our network, in local groups. And we also now have a Women's Rights Network in Canada and a Women's Rights Network in Australia. I'm going to be coming back on in a couple of weeks to talk about that and some other things. So meanwhile, you can Google or do a Twitter search on those 2 organizations if you want to know more. Anyway, I'm here to talk about the report, when we are at our most vulnerable, that I'm pretty sure most people caught up in this ideology in the UK will know about. I'm not so sure whether any overseas viewers will know about it, but what happened, and it's had significant impact. So what happened was that one of our groups, or local groups, did a freedom of information request of the police in their county, and said how many rapes and sexual assaults have there been in hospitals within their area. And the numbers that came back were absolutely astonishing. It was you couldn't believe this. Is something wrong, or is this indicative of what's happening across the country? So we thought, let's do a big project on it, and let's do freedom of information requests to all police forces. And there's 43 police forces. So we did. That's taken a long time. A small team working on it, solidly, chasing up, pulling numbers together, getting responses, going back. It's not an easy thing. It's not, you send off submit a form and then you get an answer back. So there's a lot more toing and froing and that. And the way our network is set up, we bunch together people that work in particular sectors, as well as having a geographical locations. So for instance, teachers or people that have got specific interests in sports or knowledge on the sports, and they work up sort of campaign projects. So we've got an academics group, and went into the academics group and say, listen, we're gathering all this information. It looks pretty horrendous. Is anybody here would like to take it on, write a report? And Professor Jo Phoenix, who some of you may know from, she was Open University. She's now pursuing a court case with them for, I can't remember the exact terms, but dismissal for harassment, basically. And so she's a professor in criminology. She's now at Reading University. And so she said, yeah, she'd take it on. Perfect person for this, perfect background and knowledge for putting this report together. So report came, working on it for months, and the results are 6,500 rapes and sexual assaults across the UK in hospitals. Now, this is private and NHS. 2,000 of those numbers were rapes. 1,000 of those numbers, we don't know how many rapes, how many sexual assaults, were actually on hospital wards. We presume when we say wards, we're talking about inpatients here. That is actually 35 of the police forces that responded to us. The 43 police forces, only 35. Not that they didn't respond, but they found some way not to provide us with the information. Usually reasons that fundamentally come down to cost. And they're allowed to, if it goes over, the costs are estimated to be over £600, you're allowed to refuse a freedom of information request. So the data was difficult to match up because they're all, recording them in different ways. But we did our best. One force, at least one force we know of, because they were upfront about it, say they didn't include any data with numbers less than 5. So we had to count 0, because we didn't. It could be 4, could be 3, could be. So we could count 0 for that. Of course, we've got the missing police forces, and we've got knowledge that universally these crimes go unreported predominantly. So we can estimate, we can have a good guess that the real numbers of people that suffer, and predominantly women, we're talking in the 90+%, of course, of these crimes committed by men against women. And they're just, there's 3 incidences of gang rape, 2 on a female, 1 on a male. 9, we know of 9 children. Now, this is where forces have given us those sorts of information. So there's a lot more unpicking that can be done and will be done. We'll go on to pursue some of this stuff. So the numbers themselves are horrendous enough. 4% resulted in a summons or charge. Now, that's not an outcome of conviction. That is just means it's moved to the next level. And it goes from reporting, you report something to the police, they don't necessarily record it for action for a variety of reasons. It's mainly about manipulating data as far as I can see it. Once it's recorded, it then couldn't end up after investigation, end up in charge or summons. It then goes to the CPS. It then goes to the court, possibly. And all these different stages, there's a dropout of. So you end up getting very, very low numbers from original starting point to end up. Now, we know this is true of rapes and sexual assaults across the board. This is not just in hospitals. This is just standard for rapes and sexual assaults. But what you've got to ask the questions, given that, hospitals have got CCTV, where's the evidence? What investigation is being done on this? So lots and lots of questions coming out of these statistics. So we have called, as a result of it, we have called for better recording. Who are the victims? Are the patients? They're not all. I'm pretty sure they cannot all be patients. So staff, who are the alleged perpetrators? Are they also staff, or are people just walking in off the street? Oh, I doubt that. That's a bit of a daft question. That I shouldn't think that. It's not opportunistic. And there's not. They're not too far away from Jimmy Savile. Everybody, didn't we think that was maybe Jimmy Savile was one of those who aren't in the UK might want to Google that particular perpetrator. But it was fundamentally in hospitals and taking advantage of people, of vulnerable people. So better recording in order that those that have the power to do something about this and introduce proper safeguarding, there needs to be a better interrogation of the data. And that's going to involve the police in a lot of looking again at I have no doubt that they know the information, but it's just they can't do a very quick search on the records they have to get the information out. So there's going to be, we are going to be calling on all police forces to be undertaking that work and looking so that we can get better understanding of exactly who, where, why, what these crimes are carrying out. And all the guidance we seem to have that the hospitals, private and NHS, have to answer to. The policies promote something called sexual safety and well-being. Rather than safeguarding, they don't seem to be, exploring the same-sex ward issue. And is this making people more vulnerable? Is there a big safeguarding requirement? We know that in 2010, the then Secretary of State for Health, forgive me, I can't remember his name right now. There was documents produced saying we're absolutely committed to same-sex accommodation for people in wards. Women should not have to pass by a man on their way from their bed to the toilet. And it went on in some detail about the reasons why privacy, dignity, and security, same-sex wards had to be in place across. And here was the government, 2010, government commitment to this happening. However, there was an Annex B to that document, and that Annex B said that if somebody came along and identified the gender different to their by sex, then they were to be accommodated in the appropriate ward. Now, with the increase, and that kind of went unnoticed, I think, for a long time, maybe Sally will know better, But with the increase in people self-identifying, that's clearly making a nonsense of the policy that says you have to have same-sex accommodation. So that's one of the things we will be calling for. We're not at the moment focusing completely on that, because I don't want to detract from the main issue, which is that women, predominantly women, are not safe in hospitals, whether they work there or whether they're in bed there or whether they're visiting for to get their corns removed or whatever. We don't know. And that is fundamentally the issue. And I don't want that sidelined, although that's the Annex B is a very, very significant part of that. Now, we've got a fabulous podcast, which is an interview with Joe, who wrote the report, Joe Phoenix. So you go onto your podcast and look for Women's Rights Network, it'll come up, and you'll see it was only last week, I think it was launched. Or you could go onto our website and you can look at our media channels. I think it's got podcasts there. It is a really, really good listen. And she goes into quite a lot more detail than I'm able to in this short segment about the report. And she's the author, and she's professor of criminology. She's great. So it's a good listen. I'm absolutely astonished at the response our report has had. We're not the first to have raised this as an issue. It's not, I can't say it's not been a secret, but others have raised it before. However, we released it on a Monday. On a Wednesday, there was a question in the House of Commons, in Parliament, to the Prime Minister about our report. On Friday, the Health Secretary convened a meeting of senior officials in the health service to discuss what they were going to do about this. Within 4 days, we had achieved significant action. Now, our job is going to be keeping on top of that, making sure action is indeed what happens. We can't, I would hesitate, can't introduce knee-jerk reactions such as there's been a lot of talk about body cams. There needs to be a proper understanding of where is the problem that we need to fix. You know, same-sex wards, that could be a very quick one. We don't know how much of that they will fix. The issue with perhaps mental health patients, because of lack of funding and the closure of other mental health facilities. Mental health, or old people, demented people are in hospital for longer than they should be. Is that part of the problem? But without interrogating these incidents a lot more, it's finger in the air stuff. So we will be pushing our local groups will be pushing their police forces and their hospitals. We already have a couple of meetings arranged with a couple of police forces. Won't say anymore, don't want to disrupt any potential there. We've got a couple of meetings with hospitals. We've achieved that. We're encouraging all our women to be raising this with their MPs. MPs need to know about it. And particularly in light of any discussions, parliamentary discussions we do get on Annex B, this will be a fundamental document. Our report will be fundamental to hopefully any changes that come about there. So that's all I have to say. I said briefly at the start that I'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk to you about Global Women's Day, which will be on the weekend of the 7th, 8th of July. Some of you on here already know about that. So I'll come back and talk about that. And any questions, I'll talk about Women's Rights Network Canada and Australia and any other countries that join us by then.